"She's an augmentee," Boyd Latham said, loud enough for the whole room. "Don't get attached to her. Don't learn her name. In 3 weeks, she'll be somebody else's paperwork." The arms room in the old shop building at Cordell smelled like solvent and hot dust, and the 60 years of machine oil soaked into its concrete. 6 cadre men stood around the rack while the new instructor signed for a rifle. She wrote her name in the book without hurrying. Adele Ransom. She checked the bolt, checked the crown, set the rifle in the crook of her arm, and looked up at the window, which faced east across the bowl, where the old Vega mill sat under 400 feet of tailings and rock. "Question," she said. "There it is," Latham said. "Your afternoon relay, what time do you shoot it?" 1600, same as the last 9 years. Adele looked at the window a moment longer. "Then you've been running 2 different ranges and calling them one," she said. "The rim shadow comes off that west wall and crosses the floor at about a meter a second. Everything after 4 o'clock is a different mountain than the one you zeroed on." Somebody laughed. Latham didn't. He had been on this mountain since he was 24 years old, and he had never once heard a stranger say something about it that he had not already thought, and the small, ugly feeling that gave him came out of his mouth as a grin. 19 days, he said. "That's how long you've been here. You know what 19 days makes you?" "New," she said. "New," he agreed. She hung the range key on her belt and went out into the heat, and none of them noticed that she had not been offended, or that she had not been surprised, or that she had answered a question nobody had asked her yet. If you're new here, hit subscribe before we go on, and tell me in the comments what city you're listening from, because I want to know where this one lands. Stay with me to the end, because 11 days from that morning, 3 cadets are going to back her into a gravel alley between 2 shipping containers at 10 o'clock at night, and one of them is going to put his hand on her chest. What happens in the next 3 seconds is the reason all of them are still breathing 2 weeks later. The Cordell Mountain Training Detachment ran a 3-week capstone in the high, dry hills for senior cadets, and it ran on old bones. Everything there had belonged to a copper company first. The mill was 4 floors of corrugated iron on a concrete frame built into the east slope. The ore bin above it still held 200 tons of waste rock on timber posts. There was a haul road that switchbacked up the east side, a maintenance gate at the north end, an ammunition point out on the flat, and a rail incline that ran from the mill yard 400 feet up to a bench on the west side. 32 degrees, 1 wooden car, 1 hoist house with a drum and a brake, and a head sheave the size of a dinner table. Adele had learned to read air on a hillside that looked nothing like this one, from a woman who had never fired a rifle in her life. Her grandmother kept bees on 11 acres outside Kingman. Ivy Ransom was 61 that summer and Adele was 9, and the deal was that Adele could work the hives if she stopped asking questions during the work and saved them for after. They pulled frames in the morning and again in the late afternoon, and one August evening Adele stood there with the smoker in both hands and the light going orange, and asked why they had to quit so early. "Watch them," Ivy said. "They're going in. They're going in early. Every one of them. You know why? It's getting dark." "It's not dark. It's 3/4 of an hour to dark." Ivy took the smoker away from her and set it in the grass. "The air turns over at sundown. All day it's been climbing this hill because the rock's hot. Then the shadow comes across and the rock quits, and the air stops climbing, and for a few minutes it doesn't do anything at all, and then it starts sliding back down. The bees feel it before you do. That's all. So what do we do?" "Nothing," Ivy said. "You can't argue with the air, honey. You stand still, and you're ready for the 4 minutes it gives you, and then it's gone, and you go home." Adele had run a stopwatch on a mountainside for the first time when she was 10 years old in a bee veil, because her grandmother said the turnover came about 7 minutes behind the shadow, and Adele wanted to know if that was true. It was true. It had gone on being true in Georgia and in Arizona and in 3 places she did not talk about, and it was true at Cordell, where the bowl faced west and baked all day and let go all at once. On her 4th day at the detachment, she had taken a stopwatch out to the mill yard at 6 in the evening and timed the shadow climbing the east wall from the mill roofline to the top lip of the ore bin, and written the number in the back of a green field book in pencil, and done it again the next evening and the next. There was a letter in the same field book that she had never mailed. Not a letter. 3 of them, all from the other direction. Her niece Josie was 19 and lived in the trailer behind Ivy's house, and was in her 1st year of a nursing program in Kingman, and she wrote to Adele on lined paper in blue ink, like it was 1955, because Adele had told her once that mail was better than a phone. The last one had come with a package. A half-pint jar of honey with a strip of masking tape across the lid, and 4 words in Josie's handwriting. First frame, don't share. That had been 14 months ago. Adele had put the jar in her footlocker and carried it to 2 states and never opened it and never written back, because writing back meant answering the part of the letter that said, "Grandma's hives are down to 6. She can't lift the supers anymore. You said you'd come help me take them over," and Adele had said that. She had said it at Christmas 4 years ago, and again on the phone, and again on a birthday, and once in a text message she still could not think about without her jaw setting. Josie had stopped asking. That was the thing. The last 3 letters were about school and about a dog and about a woman in her clinical group who cried in the supply closet, and not one line of them asked when Adele was coming, and the silence in that was so polite and so total that Adele had read them all 4 times looking for the ask and had not found it. She kept the jar. She kept it where she could see it when she opened the locker. She told herself that was the same as intending to do something about it. The dry fire shed had 1 working fan and 48 cadets in it on the morning of the 11th day. And Latham ran the block with his sleeves rolled and his voice bouncing off the tin. "Now, before somebody tells you different," he said, "you're going to hear a lot this week about wind. Wind is the excuse people use when they can't shoot. There's a woman on this detachment who's going to teach you to stare at a clock instead of your target." He let that sit. 19 days on the mountain, and she's rewriting the program of instruction. Nobody stops her because she's attached, and attached people are somebody else's problem. Adele was standing in the doorway with a spotting scope on her shoulder. She waited until he was finished, walked to the front, set the scope down on the table, and started her block on natural point of aim without saying one word about him, and 48 cadets learned in about 90 seconds that the entertainment was over. That afternoon she was up on the bench helping Merle Pike hang a target frame off the hoist house wall. Merle had been the range maintenance contractor at Cordell for 22 years. He was 66, built like a fence post, and he had a shop cart he pushed everywhere with a 2-ton chain block on it, a 4-foot pry bar, cable clamps in a coffee can, and a thermos. "Hold that," he said, and she took the weight of the frame one-handed while he found the shackle, and she held it exactly still for 40 seconds, which he noticed. "You've rigged," he said. "I've been around it." "Around it," he grunted. "Do me a favor while you're up here. That brake." He pointed into the hoist house at a long steel lever, polished silver at the grip. "Never grab it. Everybody wants to grab it. You slam that and the wrap comes off the head sheave and jams between the sheave and the guard, and then you got a car sitting halfway up a mountain and a 66-year-old man with a pry bar. How do you get it back on?" He looked at her sideways. "You take the load off with the block. You walk the wrap back over with the bar, you reset your clamps, you take up the slack. 20 minutes if nothing's gone wrong. Why?" "Because you told me," she said, "and now I know it." He poured her coffee out of the thermos into the cup that was the lid, and she drank it and said it tasted like a penny. And he said that was the water, and she said no, it was definitely him. The men liked her. That was the part Latham could not get to sit right in his chest. She sat down at the chow tables with them and told a story about a first sergeant, a rented van, and a live goat. Told it flat, with the timing of somebody who had told it before and knew exactly where to stop, and Staff Sergeant Marcus Teague laughed so hard he had to put his head down on his forearms. Somebody asked her where she'd been before this. "Places with worse coffee," she said. That's not an answer. It's the true part of one. She checked her ammunition every evening, which they also noticed and made fun of. 20 rounds of 190-grain match in a numbered box, each one turned base up, each one rolled under her thumb on the tailgate, the box lid marked in pencil with a date and a temperature. Latham called her the accountant. She let him have it. Cadet Colin Vance was 22 years old, from Sacramento, a wrestler, and the loudest voice in his class, and 11 days of Latham had convinced him that the new instructor was a joke the cadre were all in on, and that he had been invited to help tell it. At 10 o'clock on the night of the 11th day, Adele came out of the ammunition point with her field book under her arm and turned into the gravel alley between two containers, and 3 of them were in it. Vance was in the middle, Renner behind her left shoulder, Dawes at the far end, half in the light, already not liking it. "Ma'am," Vance said pleasantly, "we had a question about the block." "Ask it in the morning. See, the thing is, in the morning you'll have your book." He reached and took the field book out from under her arm, easily, the way you take something from someone who is going to let you. "Everybody wants to know what's in the book." "Give it back." "Is it a diary?" Renner said behind her. She turned so the container was at her back and both of them were in front of her, and she did it without any hurry at all, and Dawes at the end of the alley felt the hair come up on his arms without understanding why. "Cadet," she said, "you've got about 2 seconds to hand me that book, and then this is a different night for you." Vance laughed and put his hand flat on her chest to walk her back a step, the way he'd have done to a man in a bar, and afterward, for the rest of his life, he could not explain what happened in the next 3 seconds because he did not see any of it. She took the wrist. She turned it in a direction wrists do not go, and she stepped through, and the gravel came up and hit him in the shoulder and the side of the face, and his arm was somewhere behind him being held by 2 fingers, and her knee was on the back of his elbow. And it did not hurt yet, and he understood with total clarity that this was because she had decided it shouldn't yet. Renner moved. She said, "Don't," without looking up, and Renner didn't. Adele picked the field book out of the gravel with her free hand. She read the cover, which said, "Ransom, A.A. Cordell," and she handed it to Dawes at the end of the alley, who took it because he could not think of anything else to do with his hands. "Here's what happens," she said. "Nobody reports this, not you, not me. You show up at 0500 and you shoot, and I teach you, and in 9 days you leave here and get commissioned and go be responsible for people." She let the wrist go. "I've been in 3 units where somebody decided the new one didn't count. In 2 of them it got somebody killed. You want to be a lieutenant, Vance? That's the whole job, figuring out who counts before you need them." She stood up. Vance stayed on the gravel a second longer than he needed to. 0500, she said, and walked out of the alley, and the sound of her boots on the gravel got quieter and stopped, and none of the 3 of them said anything for a long time. Merle Pike saw a thing 2 days later that he chewed on for a week without getting anywhere. He was up on the bench replacing a stringer on the incline deck when a gust came off the rim and took the plywood target backer he'd leaned against the hoist house. It went up and over the edge and dropped into the yard 400 feet below. And he said something about his mother, and looked around, and Adele was 20 feet away, sitting cross-legged with the green book open. "Wind's building," he said. "No," she said. "It's quitting. That was the last one." He looked at his watch because he was contrary. He looked at it again 11 minutes later. There wasn't a breath of air anywhere on the bench, and there wasn't for another 4 minutes, and then the cool came sliding down off the rim past his neck, and the dust on the deck started walking downhill. All of it, all at once, like it had been told. She hadn't looked up. She'd written a number in the book and the time next to it and gone back to reading. Merle stood there with a hammer in his hand for a while. He wanted to say something to her about it, and he could not find the sentence. What he ended up saying out loud to nobody 3 days later in the shop was, "That woman knows what time it is." The trucks came up the Hall Road at 7 minutes past 7 in the evening with their lights off. The bivouac was in the mill yard, and the chow line was 50 cadets long, and Merle's incline car was 2/3 of the way down with 6 water cans on it. Adele was standing at the tailgate of the instructor truck with her rifle case open, boxing ammunition, when Teague said, "Whose trucks?" "Not ours," Merle said. "Nothing scheduled." They were 400 meters out and closing on the yard when the first burst came from the lead one, and the tin on the mill's north face made a sound like hail on a roof. After that, it was noise. Somebody at the bottom of the incline grabbed the brake lever, and the car jerked and stopped dead 40 feet up, and the haul cable came off the head sheave and wedged itself against the guard with a bang that Merle heard 400 feet away and understood completely. 50 cadets went 4 directions. Latham got a voice on and started stuffing them through the mill's east door into concrete, and the 2 trucks came into the yard and men came off them, and Cadet Daniel Euler was crossing the open 20 feet from the door when the second burst came across, and he did not get up. Latham counted them inside with his hand on each shoulder, twice, out loud, because he did not trust himself the first time. 12, he said into the radio. I've got 12 in the mill, 12, and Euler's in the yard, and Euler's gone. Major Emmett Crandall was at the north gate when it started, 4 minutes away and cut off by his own road, and he stood in the door of his truck, listening to the mountain come apart, and understood in about 10 seconds that he had nothing to send. "Ransom," he said on the net. "Ransom, this is Crandall. Ransom, where are you?" "Bottom of the incline stairs with Teague. I'm going up." Crandall put his forehead against the door frame for a second. 19 days ago, he had sat in his office with the sergeant major and read a 1-page assignment memo and said the words "an administrative favor" to somebody, and the sergeant major had said nothing, and Crandall had felt clever. "Ransom, I'm going to say this on an open net," he said. 3 weeks ago, I told my sergeant major your assignment here was a favor being done for somebody's career and that you'd be gone before it mattered. I read 1 page of your file and quit. That's mine, and I own it." He swallowed. "I need the West Bench. I need it now, and there is nobody else in the state who can be on it in 10 minutes. The whole detachment heard it. 50 people on 4 frequencies heard it. What came back was 11 words, in a voice with nothing in it at all. "Ransom moving. Give me Latham's frequency and the count in the mill." 400 feet of stair runs beside the incline rails, treated timber, no rail on the outboard side, and it faces the bowl the entire way. She went up it with the rifle across her back and Teague behind her, carrying the aid bag and 40 pounds of water, and they made the first 100 feet in the shadow of the ore bin and the second 100 with rounds going into the hillside above them, high, the shooter guessing. She could hear the difference between the rounds that were meant for her and the rounds that were meant for the mill. The mill ones arrived as a sound like a shovel in gravel, and hers came past with a crack that arrived at her face instead of her ears. Her legs were finished at 300 feet. Her body was making a very reasonable argument, which was that they should get low behind the stringers and stay there, and she overrode it by counting stairs in 4s, the way she had counted frames in a hive, and by saying a sentence out loud on every 4th, 7 minutes behind the shadow, 7 minutes behind the shadow. At the top, there was 30 feet of open deck between the stairhead and the hoist house. She went across it. Teague was 6 feet behind her, and the shooter on the far ridge finally got a range on the deck, and Teague went down on the boards hard and did not get all the way up. She took him by the drag handle and pulled him into the hoist house and got the door frame between them and the ridge, and then she was on her knees with her hands inside his gear, and she was not a shooter for a while. "Latham, Ransom, say the count." 12. Latham's voice tight. 12 in the mill. There's men in the tailings cut on my north side, and I can't see into it. Where are you? Bench, hoist house, Teague's hit. A pause, and then Latham said, "How bad?" in a voice she had not heard him use. "Working." Marcus Teague was 34, and had a chest that was not doing what a chest does, and Adele had a bag full of the wrong things and a flashlight in her teeth. She got the seal on. She got him up on the hit side so the good half could work. She talked the entire time, low and steady, and none of it was about him. "You know what Merle told me about this break," she said. "He told me the exact way it breaks, and then he told me the exact way you fix it. 22 years, and he stood there and gave that to a woman he'd known 9 days. Teague said something that wasn't words. 'Yeah,' she said. 'Again, breathe out for me all the way out.'" His pack had come half open on the deck, and there was a white envelope in the top of it, creased soft, addressed in pen, stamped. She put it back in and buckled the flap, and he watched her do it. "That's my dad," he said. Ray, 9 years. I wrote it in March. It's stamped. I keep taking it to the box. He got some air. Ransom, am I going to live? She did not tell him he'd be fine. She put her hand flat on his sternum where he could feel it, and she gave him the only thing she had that was true. Your lung's down, and it's staying down, and that's survivable. You're going down that incline on the car inside the hour, and there's a helicopter coming to the yard, and you'll be in Tucson before midnight. And the first thing you will do when you can hold a pen is sign about 40 pages of paperwork and complain about it. She waited until he was looking at her. You're not dying on this mountain. Not tonight, not with me up here. That's a fact, and you can hold on to it. Okay, he said. Say it back. Not tonight. That's right. She wiped her hands on her thighs and picked up the rifle and went to the window and became something else again. The first two she found in the yard, in the last of the light, working along the truck line toward the mill door, and she took both of them, and the mill's east side got quiet for 11 minutes. Then she keyed the maintenance net. Merle, Ransom, you in the pump house? Nothing. Merle, key twice if you can't talk. Nothing. The net hissed, the way an open channel does. An empty patient sound with a little tick in it every few seconds, and she said his name a fourth time and a fifth. She had a picture in her head of a 66-year-old man in a khaki shirt pushing a cart, and she could not stop the picture, and her hands were doing the reload without her, and she noticed she had stopped breathing correctly and made herself do it, 4 in, 6 out, the way she made cadets do it. Merle, the hiss, the tick, 11 seconds, 20. She counted 41 seconds of it before she made herself put the handset down, and 41 seconds was long enough to go all the way to the end of the thought and stand there. The men below were not amateurs. That was the thing she kept having to admit as the light went. They pulled off the yard when she hurt them. They put a belt fed on the sill of the ore bin, 400 meters north of the mill and 30 meters above it, which was the exact position from which the mill's open south side could be swept, and which she could see from the bench, and nobody else on the mountain could. And she could not hit it. She tried at 1904, and again at 1907, and both rounds went somewhere into the tailings, and she knew before the second one landed why, and knowing did not help. The bowl at last light was 3 different rivers of air stacked on top of each other. The east wall had been at 50 degrees all afternoon and was still pushing a column straight up. The floor had already gone into shadow and was starting to slide. Her own bench had a rim breeze on it that had nothing to do with either. 840 meters, 1¼ seconds of flight, 3 arguments to cross, and on top of it the sight picture over that hot ground was swimming like a thing seen through a bad window. The bin sill sat 2 feet higher in her glass than it actually was, and would keep doing that until the ground quit. Ransom, that gun's still up there, Latham said. Shoot it. I've shot at it twice. Then shoot it again. No. The word went out over 4 frequencies and sat there. Inside the mill, a cadet named Bishop said out loud what half of them were thinking. Why can't she just shoot? She's a sniper. It's 400 meters to that thing from her. It's right there. It's 840, Latham said, and shut up. At 1912, a man came up the north end of the bench. She did not hear him arrive. She heard the gravel change under him at 11 feet, a sound the size of a dropped coin, and the part of her brain that had run the alley between the containers took the rifle out of her hands and set it down and turned her around into him. He was bigger than her, and he had a carbine on a sling that was in his way, and he tried to bring it up, which cost him the only second he had. She got inside it. She put her forearm across the sling and wrote it down, and drove her shoulder into his sternum, and took him off his feet onto the deck boards, and his head hit the stringer, and then she had a knee on the sling and both hands where they needed to be, and it was over in a way that was not loud and did not take long. She knelt there with her heart going like a bird in a box. Her hands were shaking, there was gravel in her teeth, and she did not remember getting on the ground. She looked at the man who was not going to get up and thought with total clarity and at the worst possible time about her grandmother's kitchen and the smell of a smoker going out in wet grass and Ivy saying, "You can't argue with the air, honey," and it was so vivid and so entirely useless that she had to press her thumbs into her eyes. Then she got up and moved 60 meters south to a new place, because there had been one of them, and there might be two. At 1918, Crandall came on and said the first vehicles were 40 minutes out. At 1919, someone in the mill said the ore bin sill had 4 men on it now. At 1921, Adele looked at the east wall through the glass and watched the rim's shadow come up over the roof line of the mill, and she checked her watch, and she opened the green field book to the back page where 6 evenings of pencil sat in a column. At 1922, the shadow touched the lip of the ore bin. She keyed the handset. Latham, Ransom, 6 minutes. 6 minutes what? You're going to hold 6 minutes, and I need you to do exactly what I tell you, and I'm going to explain it once. Ransom. Boyd. She had never used his first name. Listen to me. She heard him breathe. That bowl has been cooking all day, she said. Hot rock makes air climb. All afternoon the air in there has been going uphill, and it's been going hard, and it doesn't go the same speed at the floor as it does at the bin, which is why my 2 rounds went into the dirt. There's a seam in it. I can't shoot through a seam. So what changes? The shadow. Watch it on your wall. You can see it. When the sun comes off the rock quits heating the air, and the air stops climbing, and it doesn't start sliding back down the same second. There's a gap in between, dead air, floor to rim, all of it doing nothing at all. She kept her voice slow. It runs about 7 minutes behind the shadow. I've timed it on that wall 6 evenings in a row, and it's been 7 every time, plus or minus about 40 seconds. The shadow hit the bin at 1922. That puts my window at 1929. How long's the window? 4 minutes. Then it turns over and starts running downhill, and it's garbage again until midnight. Silence on the net. In the mill, 12 people stood in the dark, listening to a woman 400 feet up explain the weather. 6 minutes, Latham said. 6 minutes. And here's the hard part. Nobody shoots. Not a round out of that building. Right now they think you're 11 cadets and a dead radio, and they're being careful. If you shoot, they'll open with that belt gun and you'll lose people through the iron. I need them relaxed, and I need them exactly where they are. You want me to sit here? I want you to get every one of those 12 behind the crusher room concrete and sit there and not make a sound for 360 seconds. The crusher room's shut. The roll-up's off its track. It's been off its track since April. Then somebody has to crank it, she said, and it's in the open. Latham looked at the door and at the yard behind it and did the arithmetic, and his mouth went dry because there was no version of that where he was the one who went, not with 12 people to hold together and a radio in his hand, and he hated the sum, and he was still doing it when Cadet Colin Vance took his helmet off, which is a thing nobody does, and set it on the floor. Chains on the outside, Vance said. Right side. It's 8 feet from the door. Cadet. 9 days ago she put me in the gravel and didn't write it up, Vance said, and went. He did it on his hands and knees in the dark and got the chain and stood up into the open to get his weight on it, because you cannot crank a jammed roll-up on your knees, and he was standing there in the yard hauling hand over hand for 11 seconds with the whole north side of the bowl in front of him, and the door came up 4 feet, and then a round went through his calf and put him on the gravel, and 2 cadets got him by the shoulder straps and dragged him, and 12 people went through a 4-foot gap into a concrete room with walls 2 feet thick. Latham keyed the mic with his hand shaking. Ransom, 12 behind concrete. 12. Vance is hit and he's with us and he's talking. A breath. 4 minutes to your window. At 1926, the 4 men on the bin sill got tired of quiet and started walking a belt into the mill's south face, and the sound of it going through that iron was the sound of the end of the world, and it went on for 6 full seconds, and it did not touch a single person because there was 2 feet of concrete in the way and a cadet in the gravel with a hole in his leg. At 1927, Adele Ransom lay down behind the rifle for the last time that night and set her elbows and did not move again. She had 12 rounds. She wrote the number on the back of her hand in pencil, which was a habit, and which she would keep doing for years. She built the shot the way she built every shot. 840 meters. Laser checked at first light 3 days earlier. From this exact bench, on a fence post she had chosen for that purpose. 210 meters of drop, 12 degrees down, and the drop lies to you, and she had the correction on the card taped to the stock, and she did not do arithmetic in her head because tired people do arithmetic wrong. 28.5 minutes on the elevation. The temperature at her position at 1900 written on the ammunition box lid in her own pencil. She turned the dial and counted the clicks out loud, and then counted them backward, touching each one. Then she stopped touching anything and waited. 1928 came, and the flag of dust off her glove was still going up the hill. She did not look at the bin. Looking at the far end, at last light will tell you a lie every time. The far end is 800 meters of somebody else's air. She looked at the ground in front of her own muzzle. She put her cheek down and felt the back of her neck where the day had been sitting since 2 in the afternoon. 1929 came. Nothing happened. The dust off her glove went up. Her body started making its argument again. It said the 6 evenings were wrong. It said plus or minus 40 seconds was a guess. It said there were 4 men on that sill and 12 people in a concrete box, and the vehicles were 30 minutes out. She let it talk. She had let it talk on a hillside in a bee veil when she was 10, and the 7 minutes came in at 7 minutes and 11 seconds, and she had learned that day that the mountain is not late, you are just early. Somewhere down in the dark, a piece of loose tin on the mill roof, which had been ticking all evening, stopped ticking. The dust off her glove stood straight out sideways, and then it didn't do anything at all. The cool came off the rim past her neck like a hand, and in her glass the bin sill, which had been swimming 2 feet high all evening, settled down out of the air and sat where it actually was, hard-edged, 4 men on it, and the whole bowl went still and honest at 1929 and 40 seconds. The rifle came back into her shoulder, and the sound went out across the bowl and came back off the east wall a 1.5 later, and 1.25 of those seconds was the round traveling, and in the mill 12 people heard the shot before anything happened at the other end, and then heard the belt gun stop. She worked the bolt without lifting her head. The second one took 11 seconds because the man moved and she let him get where he was going instead of chasing him. The third took 4. The fourth went off the back of the sill on his own into the tailings, and she did not spend a round on him. Then she lay there with the bowl going quiet and the drainage wind starting to slide down past her right on time, and she keyed the handset. Latham, Ransom, the sill's clear. 4 men are off it. Nothing north of you has a gun on that yard. I have 8 rounds. She heard him try to say something twice. 12, he said finally. Ransom, 12. I've still got 12. The car was stuck 40 feet up the incline with 6 water cans on it, and Marcus Teague's lung was down, and it was 400 feet of open stairs to the bottom. Adele stood in the door of the hoist house with Merle's pry bar in one hand and looked at the head sheave, where the wrap of cable had jumped and jammed itself between the sheave and the guard, exactly the way a man had told her it would 9 days earlier while pouring coffee out of a thermos lid. Yard, this is the bench, she said. Teague can't be carried down. I'm going to free the sheave and run him down on the car. It's about 20 minutes. Ransom, Crandall. There's still at least 1 shooter on the North Ridge. He's got that whole deck. I know, she said. That's why nobody's coming up here to help. The chain block was on Merle's cart where Merle left it, and the 4-foot bar, and the coffee can of clamps, and she dragged the cart out onto the open deck at 10 minutes past 8 at night with 400 feet of nothing behind her, and hung the block off the sill beam and started taking the load off the cable. The first round came in about 90 seconds later and went into the hoist house wall behind her. She did not run. She stood there and turned the chain, hand over hand, 1 link at a time, feeling the cable go from a bar to a rope, and the sound the chain made and the sound the round made were about the same size in her ears, which was a thing she thought about later. The second round hit the deck boards 11 feet to her left and put splinters through her trouser leg. 400 feet down in the yard, 12 people came out of the crusher room and stood in the open where they could see her, and did not have a shot, and could not climb, and could not do one single thing, and every one of them watched a woman on a lit deck put a pry bar into a sheave and lean on it. "Get off the deck," Latham said on the net. "Ransom, get off the deck, we'll figure something else." She didn't answer because her hands were busy, and her mouth was doing a thing that had nothing to do with the radio, which was saying 20 minutes if nothing's gone wrong, 20 minutes if nothing's gone wrong, over and over, in a 66-year-old man's voice. The rap came back over the sheave at 8:24. She reset 3 clamps and torqued them with the bar and took up the slack on the block, and the third round came in and hit the cart and knocked the coffee can off it, and the clamps went everywhere, and she picked up the 2 she needed out of the boards, one of them from between her own boots, and put them on. Then she went into the hoist house and put her hand on the polished silver lever and eased it, and 400 feet of cable took the load and the car started moving. She got Teague onto it herself, on the deck, in the open, and rode down with him with her body between him and the north ridge, because the car had a side rail on one face and only one, and the 4th round of the night went past both of them and hit nothing, and at 8:31 the car came into the yard and 11 people took Marcus Teague off it and ran. Cordell, ransom. Her voice on the net was so flat that Crandall, 400 meters away, thought at first it was somebody else. Bin sill is clear. 4 down at the sill, 1 down on the west bench. Teague's in the yard and he's on oxygen. Incline's serviceable, use it. I have 8 rounds and I'm staying on the bench until your vehicles are in the bowl. Ransom, do you require? Negative. Bench is quiet. That was all of it. That was the whole report, and she signed off and set the handset down on the rail of the incline deck, and then her hands started. They started at the fingers and went up to the elbows, and she could not stop them. She put them under her armpits and sat down on the deck boards with her back against the hoist house, and her whole body was shaking, and she was extremely angry about it in a way that had no words attached. Down in the yard, Latham stood over Teague until the medic pushed him back, and then he walked 20 feet away and put both hands on the fender of a burned truck and stayed there. Bishop, the cadet who had asked why she didn't just shoot, sat down in the gravel and could not get his chin strap undone, and a classmate did it for him, and he said thank you, and then couldn't say anything else for a while. At 9 minutes to 9, Merle Pike came out of the pump house with a bar of rebar he'd been holding for 2 hours and a cut over his eye where he'd gone into the wall when the first burst came, and stood in the yard looking up at the incline and said, "She fixed my sheave," and then had to sit down on the step. Latham keyed the net at 10 past 9, and everybody on the mountain heard it. "Ransom, Latham?" Long pause. 12, he said. "That's it. That's all I've got." Ms. Paula Greer came up from the Training Command's Safety and Standards office 9 days later with a hard-sided briefcase and a list. She was 51, a civilian, 26 years in the business of finding out what actually happened, and she had read the file on the flight and formed the opinion she always formed, which was that the narrative would be about 80% true. She had Adele in a room in the shop building with Crandall on the other side of the table and a recorder between them. "I want to start with your assignment," Greer said, "because I've read this 3 times. Marksmanship instructor, attached, 19 days on station at the time of the incident. Prior assignments, a support element, a training cell, a joint task force, all described in 1 line each." She looked up. "The report credits you with engagements at 840 meters, at last light, downhill, on a moving problem. Do you see my difficulty?" "Yes, ma'am." "Illuminate it for me." Adele put the green field book on the table and turned it around. "That's the shadow," she said. 6 evenings before any of this. Time the shadow touches the mill roof line, time it touches the bin lip, time the air goes over at my position. Column on the right's the interval. 7 minutes, 7 minutes 10, 6 minutes 50, 7 minutes 20, 7 flat, 7 minutes 5. Greer read it for a while. "This is a pencil in a notebook." "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Pike keeps a maintenance log with times in it. On the 14th, he wrote down the minute a target backer went off the bench because it cost him a backer. That's the last gust of the day. His time and my time are 11 minutes apart on the same evening, and they should be." She turned a page. "The ammunition box lid has the temperature at 1900 in my handwriting. The dope cards still taped to the stock. Sergeant First Class Latham's radio log has the transmission at 1922, where I tell him 6 minutes, and the engagements are at 1929 and change. The interval's the interval, ma'am. It's on both sides of the ledger, and neither one of us wrote it after." Greer turned the book around and read the column again and did not say anything for a good while. "You told 12 people not to shoot," she said. "For 6 minutes. Yes, ma'am. On a prediction. On a measurement, ma'am. I made it 6 times. That's why I made it 6 times. And if the interval had come in at 9 minutes, then I'd have shot at 1931 into bad air and missed, and they'd have opened up on the mill, Adele said. And that would have been mine. I've thought about it every night since. Greer sat back. 26 years, and there is a moment she has learned to recognize, which is the moment the paper stops being the point. Across the table was a woman in her 30s with a pencil-written notebook and no ability whatsoever to make herself sound impressive, and the paper said augmentee, and the paper was garbage. Major Crandall, Greer said without looking away, your assessment of this officer's assignment prior to the incident, in your own words, on the record. Crandall's ears went red. I said it was a favor to somebody's career. I said it out loud, to my sergeant major, and I said it because I read 1 page. He cleared his throat. I'd like that in the record, too. Greer closed the briefcase she had never opened. It's in the record, she said. The hospital in Tucson had a courtyard with 2 benches and a vending machine that didn't take bills. And at 11 at night, Adele sat on one of the benches and Colin Vance sat on the other one with his leg out straight and a wrapped calf in crutches leaning on the armrest. They're saying 6 weeks, he said. Then commissioning, maybe. Do the 6 weeks properly and it'll be 5. Everybody's been calling me. My roommate keeps telling people I cranked the door. He looked at his hands. I don't remember any of it. I remember taking my helmet off. That's it. That's normal. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Nobody else is here. You can ask. Vance took a while. Did you know? In the alley. Did you already know what you were going to do to me? Yes. How long before? About the time I saw the 3 of you standing in it. That fast. It's not fast, Adele said. It's just old. The courtyard had one of those fountains that gets turned off at night. They sat in it. I'll tell you something, she said, and then I'd like it to stay here. Okay. I missed twice. She was looking at the fountain. 1904 and 1907. Both into the tailings. And I knew exactly why. I knew it before the second one landed, and I let Latham believe for about 4 minutes that it was the rifle. I didn't correct him. Because if I'd said the truth right then, which was that I couldn't make that shot yet and I didn't know when I could, he'd have made 12 people move, and they'd have moved through that yard, and that gun was already on the sill. So you lied to buy time. I was quiet to buy time. It's the same thing when you're the one with the radio. She turned her hand over and looked at it. And there's another one. When Teague went down on that deck, 30 feet in the open with a shooter on him. I had the rifle, I had the position, and for about 1 second, 1 full second, and I can still find it, I thought, if I go get him, I lose the bench, and if I lose the bench, everybody in that mill dies. And I stood there for that second doing arithmetic on a man I'd had dinner with. But you went. I went at the end of the second, not at the start of it. Vance sat with that. He was 22 and had known this woman for 28 days, 9 of which he had spent being angry at her, and he understood that she had handed him something, and that there was a wrong thing to say. Ma'am, he said, can I say the thing I actually think? Please. You think that second makes you cold. I think that second is the truth about me and everything else is decoration. No, ma'am. He shifted the leg. I put my hand on you in that alley, and you had my arm, and you could have broken it, and everybody in the world would have said I earned it. And instead you took 2 seconds and gave me a sentence about figuring out who counts before you need them. He shook his head slowly. You don't get to tell me you're cold. I'm the evidence. I'm sitting right here being the evidence. That's not the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. You had a second where you did math on Sergeant Teague. Sure. Then you did the math and you got up and you crossed 30 feet of open deck and got him, and then you fixed a machine in the open for 20 minutes with somebody shooting at you so he could go down a hill. He was getting loud and he didn't care. Ma'am, everybody's got the second. You just remember yours. That's the only difference between you and every other person on that mountain, is that you kept the receipt. The fountain didn't run. Somewhere inside the building, a cart went past a door. Okay, she said after a long time. Okay, okay. The phone in the transient billets at Cordell was on the wall in the hallway, and it rang at 8:30 in the evening, 11 days after, and Adele picked it up because she was the only one in the building. Well, her grandmother said, you're alive then. Merle Pike's wife called Carol Denton, and Carol called me, so I've had 4 days of being the last person in Mojave County to know anything. Grandma, don't start apologizing, I'll hang up on you. Ivy Ransom was 78. She had 6 hives left and a bad hip, and a voice like somebody dragging a chair. How many'd you lose? She said. 1, a cadet, 22. That's a real thing then. All right. A pause, the sound of her sitting down. Are you eating? Some. Sleeping? No. Good. Lying to me about it would have been worse. Ivy let a beat go by. Now, Josie's here. She's not here, she's at the school. But she's living in the trailer, and she's got a boy who comes around and he's all right and he can't back a truck. And I'm going to say a thing to you, and I want you to stand there and take it. Adele put her forehead against the wall. Okay. You told that girl 4 years ago that you'd come out and help her take these hives over from me. You've said it since. Christmas, and once on the phone at Easter, and once in a text message I heard about but did not see. The old woman's voice didn't sharpen. That was the awful part. And about a year ago, she quit asking. You noticed that? I noticed. You thought that was you getting off the hook. I thought it was her deciding I wasn't going to. Adele. Ivy waited. She stopped asking. That's not the same as stopped wanting. Girls stop asking so they can keep loving you. That's all that is. She made room for you in the only way she had left, which was to stop making it your problem, and you've been reading her mercy as a discharge. Adele stood in the hallway with the phone against her ear and nothing to say. Now I'm old, Ivy said, and I'm not going to tell you what to do because that never once worked with you. I'm just going to hang up. Grandma, I'm hanging up. I love you. 6 hives. The dial tone. Adele held the receiver until it started making the noise they make. She went back to her room and sat on the bunk and opened the footlocker and moved a boot and took out the half-pint jar with the masking tape across the lid. First frame, don't share. She had carried this to Georgia and to Fort Irwin and to a room in a building she wasn't allowed to name and back here 14 months, and she had told herself the entire time that keeping it where she could see it was a kind of answer. She got the lid off. It had crystallized around the edges, pale as sand, dark in the middle. She ate some of it off the back of a plastic spoon sitting on a bunk in the transient billets in the high, dry hills, and it tasted like the 11 acres outside Kingman, mesquite, and something bitter behind it. And Adele Ransom put the jar down on the footlocker and sat there for a good while with her hands on her knees. Then she went across the yard to the orderly room, where the light was still on, and stood in the door. Sir, I need to put in for leave. 14 days, starting whenever you can stand to lose me. Crandall looked up from a stack he was never going to finish. Ransom, you've got 19 days of the course left and the after action. I know what I've got, sir. He looked at her. Something in his face gave way. Where are you going? Kingman, she said. There's 6 hives out there that need a second pair of hands before the flow. And I've been telling a 19-year-old I'd come for 4 years. She stopped. I'd like to go be a person who does the thing she said. Crandall signed it without reading it and pushed it across the desk. 14 days, he said. Take 16. Latham did a thing 3 nights before that, which nobody was supposed to find out about, and which Merle Pike found out about because Merle finds out about everything on that mountain. Greer's people had wanted the impact evidence off the ore bin sill, and the sill was 400 meters of bad ground and a 40-foot ladder that the safety office had condemned in 2019, and the contract crew was 2 weeks out. Latham went up it at 4 a.m. with a headlamp and a 60-pound bag and spent 5 hours on that sill marking, photographing, and bagging alone on a ladder that would have finished the career of anybody who fell off it and turned the whole thing into Greer at 10 o'clock without a word about who'd collected it. It went into the record as physical corroboration of the engagement sequence. It is the reason nobody anywhere in any office was ever able to suggest that what happened at 1929 on the West Bench had been luck. He came to find Adele the day before her leave started at the shop where she was cleaning the rifle before turning it in. He stood in the door for a while. "I hear you're going to Arizona." 2 weeks. "Good." He came in 3 steps and stopped. "I've been trying to do this for 11 days and I keep getting it wrong in the truck." She put the bolt down and gave him the room. "That first morning in the arms room," he said. "What I said about you, about nobody learning your name." He stopped. He started again somewhere else. "I've been on this mountain 16 years, and every year they send somebody through here who's going to fix us, and they're gone in a season, and I got good at deciding early so it wouldn't cost me anything later." "Boyd." "No, let me," he put a hand up. "It's not that I was wrong about the shooting. That's not what anybody can be wrong about shooting. It's that I stood in front of 48 cadets and taught them how to look at you. That's what I did. I taught them. And then 3 of them cornered you between 2 Conex boxes at 10 o'clock at night. And where do you think they got the idea that they could?" The fan turned in the corner. "I got 12 people," he said, and his voice came apart and he pulled it back. "I had 12 people behind 2 feet of concrete, and it was because I did what you told me, and I did it because I was out of options, not because I believed you. I want that said out loud. I did not believe you. I obeyed you." He looked at the floor. "I'm sorry, Ransom. I'm sorry for the arms room, and I'm sorry for the dry fire shed, and I'm most sorry about the alley, which I never touched and which is still mine." Adele let the silence run about 4 seconds. "Say it to them," she said. He blinked. "The cadets. 47 of them are still here. You taught them how to look at me in that shed. Go stand in the same shed." Latham nodded slowly, twice, and took a long breath and said, "Yeah, okay." He did it the next morning, without notes, and it took him 11 minutes, and Merle Pike stood at the back with a coffee and did not blink the whole time. Ray Teague called her on a Tuesday. Adele did not know who it was for the first several seconds, because the voice was old and it did not use any of the words that people use. "Is this the lady from the hill?" he said. "The one that was up on the hill." "This is Adele Ransom." Okay. A long breath, in and out. "This is Ray. I'm Marcus's dad." She sat down on the bed. "He's got tubes in him," Ray said. "They let me sit in there. I've been sitting in there 4 days now. I drove from Barstow." Another breath. "I got a letter Monday. It come in the mail Monday, with a stamp on it, and it was mailed the day after, so somebody put it in a box for him." "A nurse did," Adele said, "in Tucson. It was in his pack. I asked her to." "You asked her to?" "Yes, sir." There was a sound on the line then that she did not have anywhere to put. 9 years, Ray said. 9 years, ma'am? Over nothing. Over a truck and a thing I said about his mother's house, and neither one of us would— He stopped and got going again. He wrote that in March. He's had it in his bag since March, and I've had a phone in my pocket the whole time, and neither one of us— He couldn't finish it, and he didn't try to. "Mr. Teague," she said, and found that she had nothing to put after it. "I want to say the thing right," he said. "I've been practicing it in the truck. I want to say it right, and I can't." "You don't have to." "I do, though," he steadied. "You didn't know him. You'd known him 3 weeks. And you were up there on that hill with him, and you had a rifle, and 12 other people, and every reason in the world, and you took my son's letter out of his bag, and you buckled it up so it wouldn't get lost, and then you gave it to a nurse. In the middle of all that, you did the small thing." Adele put her hand over her mouth. "I got my son back," Ray said. "I got him back, and I got him back talking to me, and there is not a thing in this world I can do for you, and I've been laying awake trying to think of one." And Adele Ransom, who had told a man his lung was down, and it was staying down, and he was going to be annoyed about the paperwork, who had lain on a deck at 1929 and counted clicks out loud, sat on the edge of a bunk in the transient billets at Cordell, and made a sound out loud into a telephone that she had never made in front of anybody in her life. "I'm sorry," she said. I'm sorry. I don't know how to—" "That's all right," Ray Teague said. "That's all right, honey. I don't either. Let's just both of us sit here a minute." They did. Neither one of them hung up for a long time. Crandall stood the whole detachment up in the shop bay 3 weeks later, cadre and cadets and Merle Pike in his khaki shirt, and did not use a microphone. On the 12th of the month, I told my sergeant major that Sergeant First Class Ransom's assignment here was a favor to somebody, and that she'd be gone before it mattered, he said. I said that to a man who works for me. That's what my judgment was worth. Nobody moved. Effective Monday, she is the detachment's chief marksmanship instructor, and she owns the program of instruction. Her evening block is in the syllabus. Her shadow table is going on the wall of every range shack on this mountain, and every class from here forward will learn it on day 1. He looked at the cadre. And there will not be another instructor on this detachment who has to spend 19 days proving they're allowed to be in the room. Not while I'm here. I ran that as a culture. I'm ending it as a policy. Adele stood at the back with her hands behind her and her face doing almost nothing at all, which by then everybody understood. Merle Pike came and found her at the incline head the next evening with 2 cups of the coffee that tasted like a penny. They keep asking me about it, he said. Every reporter, every board, everybody. What did you see, Mr. Pike? You were there 22 years. What do you tell them? He handed her a cup and looked out at the bowl, where the shadow was coming off the west rim and starting across the floor, the way it had every evening since before either of them was born. I tell them the truth, which is that I've watched a couple thousand people shoot off this mountain, he said. Colonels, champions, fellas with rifles cost more than my truck, and every one of them, every single one, came up here and looked at that bowl and asked it how far. He drank some coffee. She's the only one in 22 years that ever asked it what time it was. He shrugged, embarrassed, and went to put his cart away. 14 months later, there were 9 hives on the 11 acres outside Kingman because Josie had split 3 of them in the spring and every split had taken, and she had done it with a hive tool in one hand and a phone propped on a cinder block with her aunt on the screen saying no, further down, you're going to roll her. Adele woke at 3:10 in the morning, which is what she does now. It arrives on its own, and it does not negotiate. She has stopped fighting it and started arranging around it. She goes to bed at 9. She keeps her boots by the door, and between 3 and first light, she does the things that are better done alone. She got up and went out, and Ivy's kitchen light was already on, because the old woman has been getting up at 3 for 30 years and has never once said a word about the coincidence. They drank coffee at the table without much talking. At 4, Adele went out with the smoker and the veil and worked the 2 hives closest to the fence in the dark by feel, which she is good at now, and the sun came over the ridge at 6:10, and Josie came out of the trailer with her hair in a towel and said the same thing she says every time, which is, "You started without me," and did not mean it. There was a photograph on Ivy's refrigerator of a man in a ball cap standing at a gate under a sign that said Cordell Mountain Training Detachment, and a second man beside him with his arm around him and 40 pounds off him and a scar you couldn't see in the picture. Marcus Teague went back to work in January on a limited profile and runs the range control shack now, and Ray drove up from Barstow to see where it happened, and they took that picture at the gate, and Marcus mailed it to Arizona because he did not know what else to do with what he owed. Colin Vance is a second lieutenant at Fort Benning and has a limp when it's damp, and a story he tells badly on purpose. He wrote in March on lined paper in blue ink, which Adele suspects he thinks is his own idea, and what he wrote was that he'd had a soldier come to him about being frozen out by the section, and that he'd gone and stood in the bay and said something, and that he wasn't sure he'd said it well, but he'd said it. Merle Pike retired in the fall and could not stand it, and now works Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the incline runs, and the head sheave has a new guard on it that he designed himself and will explain to anybody. Aunt Dell. Josie was on the ground beside the 4th hive with the frame across her knees. Look at this one. Look how she's laid it. That's wall to wall. Adele crouched and looked. That's a good queen, she said. Don't get attached. They don't last. You're a nightmare. I'm a realist. Mark her anyway. Josie marked her, tongue between her teeth. Then, not looking up, Grandma says you got up at 3 again. I did. Is it going to stop? Adele thought about lying and didn't. I don't know, she said. It might. Right now, 3 in the morning is when I'm awake, so that's when I do things. There's worse arrangements. Josie set the frame back down in the box, careful, the way she'd been taught, in a phone screen propped on a cinder block. How do you do it, she said. The waiting part. That's the part I can't do. In clinical, I mean. Everybody's telling me to do something, and I know the right thing is to stand there for another minute, and I can't stand there. Her aunt was quiet long enough that a bee walked all the way across the back of her glove. You don't get to pick when it comes, Adele said. The 4 minutes. Nobody does. You just have to be the one who's ready when it turns. That's Grandma. Most of it's Grandma. They shut the hives up before the heat and went in, and Ivy had the eggs on. She came back to Cordell on a Sunday at the end of the month and let herself into the shop building at 4 in the morning because that's the hour she has, and because the arms room is quiet then, and she likes to look at what she's turning over to the next class. The arms room in the old shop building smelled like solvent and hot dust and 60 years of machine oil in concrete, the same as it did on the morning a man told 6 other men not to learn her name. The rifles were in the rack. The book was on the table. And on the wall, by the light switch, in a laminate sleeve, was a card with a column of times on it in her handwriting. The shadow off the roofline, the shadow at the bin lip, the interval, 7 minutes, give or take 40 seconds. The original one, the pencil one, out of the back of a green field book. Somebody had put fresh tape on the corners. Somebody else had written underneath it, in a hand she didn't know, copies in every range shack. Do not remove this one. There are 11 of those cards on the mountain now. There are more than that in Georgia and in Washington State, because cadets take pictures of things. It has her handwriting on it and not her name, and that suits her. Adele Ransom took the key off the board and signed for a rifle and wrote the time in the book, and the sky outside the east window had just started going gray over the bowl where the shadow would come down again that evening at a meter a second, the way it always has. She picked up the rifle and went out to the truck, level-eyed, unhurried, into the last of the dark.